Okay, I've developed the drawing a little further, and a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, don't get too bogged down in detail before you get the shadow all kind of laid in. I've done a little bit of detailing here, but I'm not doing everything that's here yet, and probably will edit some of that out because it might, again, appear confusing in the final drawing. Another thing I want to point out at this stage, without being redundant, is the color of the bag. The bag is darker than the surface it's sitting on. The orange is also darker than the surface it's sitting on. In fact, the orange and the bag are about the same degree of lightness. If we were to look at this in black and white, this is about the same value or light-dark understanding in terms of its color as this is. The shadows are darker than that to a degree, to various degrees, but the tabletop itself is a lot lighter. So the reason we see the form of the bag and the form of the orange is because the table is lighter. And so in the final drawing, what I'm going to end up doing is creating a little bit of darkness, a little bit of shading over the whole front face of the bag, this face here, and leaving the table lighter. What I want you, if you're new to drawing, to concentrate on is getting the shadows, the angles, and the proportions right. Don't worry about the color. If everything looks like it's really white in reality, let it be, but work on getting your shadows correct. If you're more experienced, definitely work on getting those tonal differences, the value contrast between the bag and the table. How dark is that core shadow? How light is that reflected light area compared to the area of the fruit that you're working with? Concentrate on getting the shadows delineated, drawn correctly, so that you're communicating what you're seeing. Remember, drawing is a visual communication. So you want to be as accurate as possible, but at the same time leave out the things that are confusing. So if you're more experienced, you're going to deal with color as well as the shadows and the light areas, and if you are less experienced, just deal with the light and shadow issues, and we'll worry about the color on the next round. Okay, you can see I've developed it a little further, and what I want to again say is that make sure that you're communicating what you're seeing accurately. I've added the shadow area, the core shadow, the reflected light area to the orange itself. I've noodled, I call it noodling, or detailed out the stem area a little bit. I've kind of corrected the cast shadow, and the cast shadow is going to be sharper in edge than this form shadow because the form is gradually turning away from the light because it's spherical. It is going to have a slow gradation into the darker areas, whereas the cast shadow is going to have a more abrupt boundary. Also, keeping in mind the shape of this particular orange, it has a little bit of a bulge on the back side, and because oranges are, shipped in crates, there's actually a little bit of flatness that gets squished together in those boxes. And so any orange that you don't pick off the tree is going to have some flat spots in it because it's been huddled together with a bunch of other oranges in a really tight space for a while. Okay, the drawing's been developed a little more. I've laid in kind of a background and delineated the edge of the surface, the horizontal surface, from the space beyond. And that helps bring the bag forward and also helps bring the orange forward. I've darkened the shadow in here, and I've started to darken this panel, and also added tone to the front of face of the bag right in here, so that it can differentiate itself from the tabletop. And again, I'm not getting too bogged down in details. making decisions about what information to include and what information to not include when I go into detail. And so in other words, like this little corner of the bag where the fold creates that little kind of notch, I do want to get that in there, but I don't necessarily want to confuse a lot of stuff that's going on in there because of other folds that really are secondary in terms of information. This edge between the front face and the side face is really sharp and clear, so I want to make sure I, again, communicate that correctly. I'll be using that word a lot this quarter because this is drawing for communication, and that's why we're here. We're learning how to communicate visually. If you thought about, trying to describe what you're seeing verbally, it's a lot easier to draw a picture. You know, that old saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. In a lot of cases it is. If you had to stand up and tell about what your company does, and you do, international business machines, and this is what you do, and this is what makes you different from, say, Linux or whatever, or you want to identify yourself differently, you're going to be using a lot of words, or you just, hold up your IBM logo and people know exactly who you are and that you don't work for Apple. But that's a whole other story. So in design, you want to make sure that you are communicating clearly. You want to make sure you're communicating clearly to your client or to your creative team. If you are in a staff position somewhere and you're working on projects, and you want to be real specific about what is being said so that your intent is understood. When you're working with clients, they want the same thing. They want their message clearly stated to their audience so that their audience will be influenced in the way that they desire and will make a decision about your client in terms of, well, do I buy that product? Do I not buy that product? Do I vote for this guy or do I vote for that guy? So communication is very important, and so as I said, that's why I'll be using that word a lot, because that's what this is all about. Okay, notice I've used this as a subtractive drawing tool. This is an additive drawing tool. Okay, I have developed this quite a bit more. Again, I've already added in the background, I mentioned that. Darkened this face a little bit more, darkened the shadow areas, did a little more definition in here, worked a little of the darkness in here so that the orange now comes forward out of the, or not out of, but from the shadow behind because it's darker than that. And kind of worked out how the shadows are going to work with that frame of reference. And I went ahead and made a real definite frame of reference around this. The reason I encourage you to do that is because as designers, we pretty much always need to understand the design space we have to work in, whether something is horizontally inclined or vertically inclined, horizontal being landscape, vertical being portrait in understanding, and so that you're aware of everything here compositionally, and it becomes easier to do that if you actually have a physical visual frame of reference around your drawing. And I've also broken that barrier with the form and the shadow to activate down here, and that again is part of design decisions when you're drawing, that to make the drawing more interesting or to emphasize, bring focal areas into clarity, things like that. But these things are things you can think about now, but work toward. And the main issue with this week's drawing is to get the proportions correctly, the size relationships, the shadow and light areas, the form shadow, reflected light, core shadow, the form shadows here, reflected light within those, the cast shadows, the surface that they're sitting on, the background, and so forth. And so go ahead and set up your own still life under a direct light source, so you've got shadows doing something. And you can see a light side and a shadow side. And I just worked here with one bag and one piece of fruit. What I would like you to do is do several pieces of fruit, one bag, couple bags, just, maybe a trio or a grouping of 5 items. And do a variety of drawings, and then you're going to pick your 2 best and scan them or photograph them, and then upload those as JPEGs for our week 3 discussion. And check on week 3 as to when you need to get those uploaded. And if you have any questions, make sure you note them in the discussion board, or you can email me directly, but most likely they'll be of benefit to everybody. And so go ahead and ask them in the discussion board. And we'll chat with you later.